So my opponent stood on the tennis court spinning a racket, and I knew the choice would come. Do I choose love or do I choose money? Everybody chooses love. It's like the virtuous answer. But that day, I decided I was going to say what most people secretly want to say, but never do. So I said it. Money. Everybody laughed, surprised, even relieved. And suddenly everybody started choosing money too. Because sometimes it's all it takes is one person to break the taboo. And it was a taboo we didn't really realize we were all carrying. And here's the contradiction. We're all successful people. You're successful. People admire your drive. But the moment money enters the conversation, your stomach turns. You've built a life that looks secure, but you don't feel any of it. Negotiation makes you nauseous. Asking feels greedy. And looking at your bank balance, forget it. Rather not. And if you've ever felt ashamed just thinking about asking for what you're worth, if you ever avoided your finances even though you know it's holding you back, if you've under-earned, overworked, and stayed small because money felt like it was off limits, you're not alone. This episode will help you move from shrinking in silence to owning your worth without apology. You'll learn how to revisit and reframe your earliest money memories so they stop running the show. You'll name and neutralize money dysmorphia, the quiet thief of joy, pride, and self-trust. And you'll understand your money type and how to lead with emotional flexibility, not fear, when it comes to money. Because this is what season 3 is all about. Building the right support system by first rebuilding the inner foundation that lets you ask, connect, and rise. And it's the heart of UnCeiling You, helping ambitious women break invisible barriers within and around them so that they could step fully into their power, purpose, and possibility. Let's dive in. All right, Dr. Maggie, thank you so much for being on the UnCeiling You podcast, where right now we're talking about networking. And in order for us to really network and maximize our network, because we really want to build a community of people around us that can lift us up and take us to the next level, we need to get real about money. I really appreciate you being here because your take is so different, the way that you approach it. And I think you're going to approach it in a way that's going to be very transforming. Many ambitious women I know are outwardly successful, but quietly battle shame and anxiety when it comes to money. And even if they're earning tons of it. So here's my question for you. Where does that story come from, and how do you help people uncover the hidden beliefs that are running the show when it comes to money?
Okay, well, let's start there. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here, and I'd like to break through any ceiling that anybody puts on me. And sometimes I do it with this, and sometimes I do it with this, and probably neither one of those are very effective.
Now, for the people that are listening, when she said the first this was she was punching in the air, and then the second this was she was covering her eyes and going forward.
Right. And as a way of saying that when you have ambition, you have to titrate it, because if you don't, it will titrate you. And in the bigger context, money has always been a taboo subject because nobody is advocating to put a sign on your chest saying, my net worth is what's yours. You just don't do that. And particularly for women, women often have been engaged in the paying of bills and thinking about money, worrying about money, but not the strategizing about money. That's kind of always left to the men. And given my more advanced age, I grew up in an era where that was absolutely solid. I make the money, says the man. You write out the checks. You be my secretary. Well, I think we've gotten beyond that a little bit, but there's still a taboo about talking about where you really stand about money. And part of it is that a lot of people don't know. And why don't they know? They don't know because money is so pervasive in terms of our need for it. And the answer to your money situation is on your credit card, in your bank balance, in your savings, and it's all fragmented. So you can keep yourself in the dark by just not putting the pieces together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
You have all the pieces out there, but you don't put it together. So you don't see the whole picture.
So, speaking of the taboo and then moving on to seeing the whole big picture, it's kind of funny. My listeners should know that I love to play tennis. And at the beginning of the match, I've mentioned this in another episode. Sometimes people have cute things on the bottom, the butt of the racket. So what you do is you spin the racket and you give person a choice, a hill or valley, a W or an M, a P or B. Prince. One person has love or money. And every time she spins it, everybody always says love, 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 love. And I'm like, what? I'm going to break it. Today, I'm going to say money. And then I said money, and everybody was like shocked. I'm like, what? You all want to say money, but you think you have to say love. So I just said what you want to say. They all laughed. And so from then on, everybody was choosing money.
Very so you had just the right situation to bring it to the surface, so they were okay talking about it because underneath they really wanted to, but they didn't know how to access it.
Yes. Yes.
But you opened the can for them.
Yeah. But you were talking about jigsaws like it's a puzzle before I rudely interrupted you with that story.
Well, I mean, I think that describes a lot of people's situation with money. And in my experience, it usually takes a crisis to bring them to the point of saying, wait a minute, I've got to do something different. And I'll give you a concrete example that happened. This kid grew up and he heard a lot of fighting about money from his parents.
Mm.
And they were well intended parents, but as a 5-year-old, she's not listening to facts about money. She's taking in the emotion and the affect that goes along with it, so that when she saw her mother burst into tears every time she opened the credit card bill, that's what she was taking in, not anything else. So what her translation of that was, oh, there's something really wrong here. My mom needs more money. I better not need anything because I may cost, her money. So something gets shut down. But then on top of that, when they're a little bit older, they make a vow to themselves and say, I am not going to be poor the way I'm growing up. And who knows, you know, how poor or rich they were, but she was taking it from the affect. And she vowed, I'm going to be rich when I grow up. So she became an entrepreneur. She started a business. The business was going great. But as it was going great, she found herself getting more and more bored with it. So she thought, well, I need more stimulation, so I'm going to start a second business. So she starts a second business, but now she's split. So neither one of them are doing very well. And all of a sudden she realizes I'm in real trouble. And that's what got her to come and see me. And as a result of the therapy, what we uncovered was that she really, in her deep heart, believed that once poor, always poor. No matter what she did, it wasn't going to work because she truly believed that she couldn't be rich. And then once she got that awareness, and she realized, wait a minute, that's my 5-year-old, that's my 7-year-old talking. That's not my 25-year-old talking. Then she was able to proceed. She got rid of the second business and scaled up her first and became very successful.
Wow. So you just described what someone's inner narrative about money can completely distort themselves. Can you go deeper with that?
Right. We are social animals and we tend to, everybody wants to connect and be a part of, belong, etc. And when that is so, then people look at other people for validation and affirmation. And when they don't get it, then they keep looking, but it's, quote, an unmet need. And the whole concept of money dysmorphia comes from body dysmorphia that a
Mhm.
lot of people in mental health deal with. That somebody, for instance, can be perfectly good looking, but every time they go look at themselves in the mirror, they find something to pick on their bodies. My thighs are too big, my face isn't right, it's not symmetric, blah, 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 blah. But these are very harsh criticisms, and it keeps them focused on everything wrong with their body. And the same thing can happen with money, that and especially with the internet, because people can put on about inferentially how much money they have. Oh, I just got a new car, or oh, I just paid off my mortgage. And so people's tendency is to compare. Oh my gosh, I've still got a mortgage. Oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly take on another bill. And they start getting into these comparisons rather than being able to say, wait a minute, I've got a house, I've got an apartment, I've got a good job, I have enough money to pay my bills. What is this? I don't have enough money. And what happens is that if it connects with some trauma about money in childhood, it ups the ante for how powerful the distortion is. So, for instance, I grew up in a family which was pretty chaotic, and both my parents came from very well off families, but my father did not do well. So I would hear these fabulous stories, but I didn't see any of that because his income was highly limited. So it's very easy for me to say, even though I got my house paid off, I've got a good job, um, all the things that bring resources in, it doesn't it doesn't have the same emotional resonance as, oh my gosh, I just forgot to pay that bill and now I have to pay double for it, or something like that. Then all of a sudden, I find myself, uh, gee, do I have enough money to do that? And I start worrying. That is a good example of money dysmorphia, where these small hits of losses or comparisons add up to making you think that you are insecure with money. And certainly in the context that we're all living with, both politically and, you know, in the world with all the wars and uncertainty
Mm.
going on, it only feeds people's worry about, oh, yeah, I may be okay now, but next month, who knows? So that it obscures the positive that you have. I think that's the real takeaway, that people have positives, but because of the nature of negative information, that it signals that things could really get bad, and it triggers the idea that there may be a bear coming down the path, or that there may be a real knock to the stock market, and your portfolio is the current bear, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful because then what it does is it takes away your joy, the joy of the things that you've accomplished. And so we're losing our joy. We're losing the pride that we have in our hard work. When that happens, what can we do about it?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important is the whole body of research now that's coming from behavioral economics. And they were the first ones to define that if you have a loss, that your negative reaction is 2.5 times more powerful than the positive reaction of a success.
Mm.
And it's the difference between if you're joyful, it's like you're looking at a beautiful blue sky with a wonderful radiant sun and these puffy clouds going by. Now, if a bear is coming down the path, that's not going to help you.
The sky is not going to help.
No, no. But being alert and being ready to fight or ready to flee, that's going to help you with the bear. And so that's what's called signal anxiety. That's why everybody reacts to losses so much more strongly because it facilitates a fight or a flight. And
Yeah.
you need that when there's a real threat. So I think helping people understand that and understand that with joy and with accomplishment and all those wonderful things, you have to be very self-indulgent in a wonderful way because you have to puff it up to 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 keep that beautiful blue sky and sun. You got to keep looking at it. You got to say, "Oh, isn't this great that it's shining on me? I
Yeah.
want more of this. Let's do things that will bring more of this."
Yeah.
But, it takes a lot of self-compassion and understanding to permit yourself to feel worthy enough to pump it up.
Right. I appreciate you bringing all that to light because that's going to help us puff up all those positive things. And so, just going back to the childhood rules that don't serve us and uncovering those, how do early experiences like around scarcity or chaos shape our sense of worth and impact the way that we lead, spend, or even ask for what we deserve?
Well, one of the things that I do when I give a talk is to ask people what their first memory of money is. And just to give you an example, and I use this in the book, that when my father would come home from work, he would sit in this big chair, and he was a big guy. He sits in this chair, and I figure out I guess I was 5 or so, that change would fall out of his pockets. So when he got out of the chair, I would go over to the chair and dig out the money. And I was making quite a little collection for myself, but he caught on.
Ah,
So he said, "I'm not gonna make this easy for you. I'm gonna throw a quarter at you, and if you catch it, you can keep it.
hmm.
But if you don't, you're gonna have to give it back. I'm not gonna give it to you." That was my first memory.
Ah,
So it was like, "So what do I have to do to keep the money coming in?"
yeah. So you have to catch the change.
Yeah, I have to catch the change.
And did you?
Yeah, I worked pretty hard at catching that change. I was also a little like a kid. I didn't like that he was withholding some of the money, so I'd go and check the chair pretty frequently.
Yeah. So what were some of the childhood scripts that you took with that as that experience?
That I had to put out effort, and I got rewarded when I put out effort.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a very good thing. That's a very good thing. But also, I grew up with a lot of confusion because money was scarce.
Mm.
But my grandfather, who lived about a mile away, was a retired mining engineer and was fortunately very generous with me. So I saw, financial stability, and he had a very, very strong work ethic. And so I was fortunately able to pick up a lot of that from him and at least know that it was possible to be money secure, even though I watched my own parents really struggle that way. And they also became very dependent on what they thought they were going to inherit. They had to wait quite a long time to get that because my grandfather lived to 89. And so I saw what I would call infantile dependency, where they were waiting rather than turning to themselves to really put forth in order to create a future that they want, that they really wanted. They stayed in that dependent state.
Huh.
And that was a very negative, I never wanted to be in that situation. So the combination of finding effort early, seeing the security that my grandfather represented, just being extremely determined to be independent, so that through my adolescence and beyond, I really pushed that probably much too much to an extreme, because then it was hard to ask for help when I needed it. But I value that sense of independence to this day, because I think it saved me from a lot of other things.
Wow, I could see that little triangle of support right there. One of the things you brought up is the connection between money and worth. And I imagine some people don't feel worthy and they either avoid money or cling to it. So I guess here's the question. You also, on your website, you have a blog that describes the idea of money types: the spender, the hoarder, the high roller, avoider. It gives us a language for sure. So, what are some patterns that you see in high achievers like you when stress hits, and how can they understand what type of help they need to build resilience instead of regret?
Okay, the first is a spender. And what the most important thing to understand is that there's some psychological need that's being satisfied by, quote, being a spender. For instance, um, the idea of going to a store, getting all that attention, the excitement of the moment of getting something you really want and walking out with it. That gives satisfaction, which keeps the spender spending. Opposite that is the saver or the amasser. And that's a person who gets a lot of pleasure out of seeing the bank balance grow, seeing their portfolio grow, putting away savings,
Right.
etc. And their satisfaction is that growth. And the third is the hoarder, which is an extreme of, I've got to hold on, I've got to hide, I've got to put under my mattress because I'm so afraid
Yeah.
of either being taken advantage of or losing, that I need that money under my mattress so I know it's always there.
Right.
And then opposite that is the high roller, and the high roller is somebody who loves risk. You know, these people who get into very intense sports, like rock climbing outside with no ropes, bungee jumping, doing crazy things on a skateboard. They love that sense of risk. And they love the sense, for instance, of going to a casino. Here comes the person who loves to show us how to really gamble, but they're after the high hit. So what their records show is only, this is when I really made a fortune. They don't take care of their losses.
Uh,
So they always think they're doing great, but in fact, they may not be at all. But their satisfaction is, I'm the, I'm the big person in the room, and I'm being admired for my courage to, throw it on the wall.
I see.
And then there's the money monk. And the money monk is a type of person that has a visceral, moral kind of disgust about dirty lucre and would quote the Bible. The Bible says you shouldn't like money, but the Bible says it's the love of money that is the issue, not the fact of money. And so they're the type of people that, a lot of them are academics, so they just give over all of the money dealings to the HR people or TIAA CREF, and they just don't pay attention to it, or they have a partner who takes care of it, but they don't want to hear about it. And then there's the avoider who just doesn't want to deal with it because of probably deep shame and worthlessness. And they can worry about money and talk about it all the time, but they don't ever do anything. And a good example of that was somebody that worked in corporate, but then wanted to teach. So they started to teach, but the differential in salary was huge, but they didn't want to pay attention to that. they would just not open their bills, which would stack up. And when her living room had 3 card tables full of unopened bills and a bill collector knocking at the door, she realized that she had to do something. But you can see that she was protecting this thing that she loved, but at the same time was feeling, come to understand through the therapy, a deep shame about hiding like that. But
Right.
and that played into that sense of worthlessness because she was so out of control with money. And I think that either lack of blinding yourself so you don't see your money situation, or if you do see it intuitively, feeling that sense of being out of control. It's like somebody who wants to lose weight, but they never lose weight, even though they think they're dieting. It's kind of a similar parallel that they're hiding some worthlessness component in their unconscious that keeps tripping them up.
So I could see where, as a high achiever, I'm having different components of every one of those at different times.
Great point. Great point. Because when people get under stress, they tend to get more rigid and they go to their default. And I'm a saver, but there are all kinds of ways that I spend money. And sometimes I feel disgusted. I can trip through all the different varieties of money types. But when it's to real panic, I get very, very frugal and very, very amassing. But what I would advocate as healthy, as somebody that may have a tendency to say amass or a tendency to spend, but they can range through all these other types here and there, but it never gets out of hand.
I see.
So that developing a flexibility, because when people get under stress, they tend to get rigid. And that can really undermine their own situation. So, as somebody gets empowered and resilient, they can be much more flexible. They can imagine a lot of different things that when you're under stress and rigid, you just don't think.
So I'd like to tie all this together to talk about what is a money master and how do you equate your worth with your money to be able to, because we're all about building a community that helps us get to that higher level. I mean, it's unsealing, breaking the ceiling, breaking barriers, but also breaking open the gift that is us. So how do we put it all together for worth and becoming a money master?
Well, the first thing I think is to use breath control, because when people get anxious, it really affects their breathing. And if people can learn that you can really calm yourself down from anxiety by doing some breathing exercises. For instance, the most common one is to breathe in and count 4, to hold it and count 4, hold your breath and count 4. And then when you breathe out, try to breathe 8 or 9, because it's the breathing out that calms your system down. So if my advice would be, first, do some breath exercises. There are all kinds of YouTube videos about breathing. There's a book by James Nestor called Breath, which I would highly recommend because it shows the importance of breathing. So if you can get yourself into a calm state, that would be the first step. Second step is this wonderful exercise that requires 2 minutes of somebody's time. And what that is think about something that you want to achieve, like being a money master, and think of something, some behavior that's related to that that you could imagine doing for 2 minutes. So if it's, oh, I don't ever look at my bank balance. Okay. If you took 2 minutes, could you think about looking at your bank balance and getting on the internet or looking at your bank balance? How long is that going to take? So you do it in 2 minutes and you see that's what's there. And if it makes you anxious, you can start doing the breathing exercises again. If it's a pleasant surprise, you can say, boy, am I glad I took that 2 minutes to do that. Now, if I took 2 minutes to do it and I got good news, maybe I could think of other things that I could do for 2 minutes that would bring good news. And if it's bad news, then I can breathe and I can get rid of the anxiety to get a better look at it. So those are two absolutely fundamental concrete steps. The third is starting to write things down because you get a whole lot of stuff floating in your head, which beautiful example was this morning when I looked at your email. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do that? And the walk helped. It gave me room to think, wait a minute, she's not trying to precipitate your anxiety attack. You're doing that all by yourself. But the walking and then I thought there's a guy named James Baker, and he has developed this journaling technique that I think is tremendous, and I think it would work great with money. And that is make a commitment to yourself that every single day for 20 minutes, you're going to sit down and you're going to write whatever comes to your mind. You're not going to censor. You don't worry about spelling or punctuation. You just sit there and you write it down for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you stop. You can either do 20 minutes a day for a whole week, or if that's too intense, you can do one session a week. So every Monday at 9, I'm going to sit down and do this. And the thing that is really interesting is what happens in the content. And if you focus on, I want to be a money master, but I keep not being one, and I keep sidestepping that, then you just keep writing and writing and writing with no censorship. And then at the end, you review what you've got. And it usually is very, very illuminating. So I would suggest that as a possibility, or if you don't want to do anything, as structured as that, just write things down, create a money master journal. And anytime you begin to think about it, write it down, get it out of your head, because then you can get more perspective.
Right. I really appreciate talking with you about this, and I know our listeners are going to love this. You have so much content in your book. You have tons of content on your website. We'll have a link to your website in the notes. But beyond that, when people contact you, what are some of the things that you can do to help them become a money master?
Well, first of all, I can get them to talk to me. That's the most important thing. Secondly, I can either do it over Zoom, or I so prefer having them in my office, because I think that there's just something about being with a human being that beats being on Zoom. Although we are very lucky to have Zoom, because I have so many wonderful people that I've met through Zoom, including you. It's just enriched my life tremendously. So I know I can do it over Zoom. And one good thing about Zoom is that I get to know what their house is like. And that's important. That's important for me to understand how they live through what their house looks like. And sometimes people take me through a tour, which is really interesting.
That's nice.
But I think it's the connection that I make with people and putting them at ease about, they're on this journey and I know they can do a lot better for themselves. And through our talking and through following through with exercises, that they can really be empowered to be much more responsible for their life in a way that dictates that what they want to have happen, they can make happen to the best of their ability. And obviously, most people who are high achievers are control freaks, and you can't control everything, but what you can control, that's you, and what you can't control, so you don't beat yourself up about that.
That's great. So then you have some peace there. Thank you
Yes.
so much for being on Unsealing You. I really love the perspective that you bring towards this. And I think it's going to help us have a little bit more control of ourselves.
Definitely. That's the goal. And control in a productive, expansive, imaginative, and full way.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed every single minute of it. And you're great to talk to because your face is so animated.
And for those that want to see us on YouTube, you can see the animation there.
Go for it.
Maggie Baker showed us what happens when we stop letting shame dictate our financial lives. She walked us through the emotional blueprint most of us didn't even know we were carrying, from inherited fears of scarcity to internal rules about what we're allowed to have, earn, or even hope for. Together, we learned to reclaim our earliest money stories and see them through adult eyes. We recognize the signs of money dysmorphia so that we could stop chasing success that we can't even enjoy. We redefined our relationship to money types that allows us to build flexibility, empowered patterns under pressure. And that's the shift we made today, from feeling stuck in shame and avoidance to seeing money as a space where you can lead, ask, and rise. This is what season 3 is here to show you, that inner clarity is the foundation for outer connection, that you can't build a strong network if you don't believe you deserve to be supported. And it's the promise of the Unsealing You podcast to help you own your ambition, rewrite outdated narratives, and rise with imagination and power. If you're ready to explore this even deeper, to ask your own questions, unpack your own stories, and surround yourself with others doing the same, join us inside the Unsealed Zone, where you just don't grow alone, we're growing together. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, keep rising. The ripple has started.